Kate Mulefalcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Today I'm beginning a journey that we're going to take together, I hope, with other people, into a very interesting topic, the topic of spiritism. And the best way to describe that is the investigation of the nature of spirits. Much more complicated, we will get into it. And this video is going to be not too terribly long. I want to talk about the man who coined the term spiritism, who wrote the books about it, and who made a huge impact into the realm of paranormal investigation. And his pen name was Allan Kardec. Kardec. And his book that we're going to go through pretty intensely here in the near future is the Spirits book. And this is only the first of his books. He did a number of books. Really an interesting man. I hope you'll agree with me. So let's look at his life and his background and the purpose of his writing. And in a separate video, we're going to start going through this book. I'm going to have a little help, which I'll explain later in the next video. So I hope you'll be interested by this and you'll stay tuned to it. I think at the end, I'm going to recommend a source, another source that will be fun. And my thing's all cockeyed here. And if you watch it, okay, I gave it away. It's a movie. It may kind of ignite your interest in him. I was struck by it. I really was compelled by his life story and convinced that we had to pursue it. So Allan Kardec, he was born Hippolyte Léon Denisard Rivail in Lyon, 1804, October 3rd, 1804, in Lyon, France. He was raised a Roman Catholic. As a young man, he studied philosophy and he studied science. He became the follower of a Swiss guy named Johann Pestalozzi, who was an educational reformer, and he became one of his real acolytes. He eventually got a degree, a PhD in medicine. He was fluent, get this, not only in his native French, he was fluent in German, English, Italian, and Spanish. I struggle with part of a language, and this guy spoke every language. It's incredible. He was a member of a number of scholarly societies, which were quite popular in those days, and I didn't bother to write them all down because, I don't think it would necessarily mean a lot, but science groups, history groups, educational groups, and such. He had a soft spot for the underprivileged. He taught free classes for the poor. He practiced mesmerism, and this might sound familiar when you say something mesmerizes you. It means it hypnotizes you, and it was named after the man who made hypnotism a thing. It started out kind of a stage act, a Dr. Mesmer. Well, Allan Kardec saw some scientific potential. He became interested in the potential reality, like the electromagnetic reality of it. This was what he studied. Very interesting. With Pestalozzi, he helped to structure the teaching models that are were used for many, many years in the schools of France and Germany. And he taught children for a long number of years. In 1839, with Maurice de la Charte, he created what was called an exchange bank, and it was an opportunity to create financial backing for trade and commerce and resources. But for whatever reason, and I didn't really understand what it was about, but they put a 10-year time limit on him doing this, and so it came to a natural end. But then his interest in spiritism is really why he's remembered. In 1855, a guy called Mr. Fortier who was called a magnetizer. And I had to look that up. I was like, magnetizer? Did he wander around with magnets? I don't know. What's that? Well, it's another word for mesmerist. It's another word for a follower of this hypnotist, Mesmer. He took Allan Kardec to Madame de Plamesson, who was a medium. Her name in French, by the way, means full house. I just thought that was interesting. Anyway, he entered into communication at this time with a spirit named Zephyr. And much to his own surprise, this is not something that he necessarily anticipated was going to happen. But he got drawn in and he was given a message about his mission in life. He was told that he would be a spokesman for the dead. Needless to say, it's made an impression on him. It was a revelation to him. And he became interested in seances. It was kind of fashionable at the time amongst the wealthy. You know, they would have get together and do table tapping and levitating and was it protoplasm? I can't remember where the stuff came out of them. And anyway, it was popular. People were all into, let's get these things to teleport, move by themselves, float across the room, levitate people off the ground. Also kind of an early version, a primitive version of a Ouija board, which just pointed to yes or no. So this guy's a scientist, right? Kardec is a scientist beyond all things. He's an academician. He's a smart guy and a scientist. And he thinks this nothing in the world is completely inexplicable. We just need to study it and learn about it. And so he began to research psychic phenomena, paranormal things, from a scientific method. He approached all this scientifically because he said, listen, it may be very possible to eliminate ordinary material causes. Maybe none of this is woo-woo or mystical. Of course, that wasn't the term he used, but basically that's what he was saying. He said, you know, this could be fraud. It could be hallucination. It could be unconscious mental activity. You know, we might be talking about people who are clairvoyant or telepathic. And they're causing the tapping and the talking and the strange things that happen at these seances. So he took a very analytical approach and he sat down and he created more than 1,000 questions. Questions about nature, about spirit, about the nature of spirit, about life on earth, the purpose of humanity, the difference in life and death. And he put all these questions into a big long questionnaire and he gave it to 10 different mediums who were unknown to each other. These are random mediums that he went out of his way to find. And remember, pre-internet, pre-telecommunication, pre-telephone, trying to get a message to anybody was a huge ordeal. And this was all over. Well, I don't know how far and wide he went, but with all the languages he spoke, it wouldn't surprise me he went far. So he got their answers back and he documented their answers and he collated them. And he came up with some conclusions. He decided that the best answer from all of these responses, from all of these different mediums put together, was that personality survives after death, and that personalities of the dead were causing these really inexplicable phenomena. So he made some conclusions about mediums in general, that they were providing information about personalities that were previously unknown to themselves, or about information unknown to themselves before the seance, that they demonstrated unknown skills. And by that he meant that some mediums were illiterate, and it was demonstrable that they were illiterate. And they would sit down and they'd suddenly start in a trance, start writing, elaborately writing, like essays as fast as the speed of lightning. It's pretty interesting. They would assume the handwriting of the dead. They would claim to be, I'm your Uncle Joe, and let me write about it, and it would be identical to Uncle Joe's handwriting. They often showed two things, xenography and xenoglossy. Xenography is a foreign writing, like writing in a foreign language, and xenoglossy is speaking a foreign language. And it would be unknown to this person. They would speak, I don't know, I'm going to make this up, but if they were French and they'd be speaking Chinese, and they'd be a French scullery maid suddenly speaking Chinese and fluently and writing, that's just an example, but that puzzling, that astounding. They often would show a range of characteristics particular to the deceased person testified about by family members and friends who knew the deceased person. So he collated all of this into a book under the concept of spiritism, the science that deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits and their relationship to the corporeal world. And he assumed this name, this pseudonym, Allan Kardec, on the advice of a spirit called Truth, who told him, you have to publish this book. So he did. He published this first book, The Spirit's Book, April 18th, 1857. And this book is about the nature of spirits, the spirit world, the relationship between spirits and the medium world. And the material world. I'm going to summarize for you in the next video the introduction to this book, because it's called Explanatory Notes. Very in-depth. I pulled it all apart. I'm ready to go here. I'm going to record it, present it to you soon. And then we'll get into the actual body of the book. And it's done very much, crack me up, like the old Baltimore Catechism, a question and answer format. So I'm going to have help when I get to that point. He published 4 more books, and he, throughout his life, professional life in this vein, published a periodical on a regular basis, and all of his writings were put together under the title Spiritist Codification. He influenced a lot of psychic researchers, and I didn't recognize any of their names, and I just took it on faith. Okay, he was influential. He's buried in the cemetery of Père Lachaise in Paris. It's where all the famous people go to be buried. And his tombstone says, to be born, in French, of course, and I'm not even going to pretend. I mean, I can read it, but my accent's hilarious, so forget it. To be born, to die, to be reborn again, and keep progressing, that's the law. Funny about that, because it's one of the Hermetic principles. So there is a movie I would like to recommend, and it is a really interesting movie. It's called Kardec, Kardec. It was made in 2019. It's Brazilian. It's in Portuguese with subtitles, and it's free on Netflix. And it's a very good movie. It was nominated for a whole lot of international awards. I don't know, what it won or didn't win, but it deserved the nominations because it's well made, it's well acted, it's well written, and the topic is just fascinating. And what shines through this movie, which convinced me to get the book, was his sincerity, his intellectual honesty, his resilience, his determination, his commitment to knowledge, and his compassion. So that's the background of Allan Kardec, and a brief introduction to the introduction of the book, which we will be doing soon. And I hope that you will be interested. I hope it'll hold everybody's attention. I think this is going to be valuable information. I just have a strong feeling. So thank you very much for watching. Slán go fóill. Slánte.